Isaiah was in his favorite hiding place, behind the shed in the backyard, with a joint he'd rolled that morning. This spot wasn't exactly a secret. Everyone, including his wife, teenage daughter, and even Bebe, knew he liked to smoke weed there, usually before meals and often afterward, too. He knew he wasn't fooling anyone, especially not his mother, Taffy, who always made a big show of sniffing the air loudly when he entered the house, reeking of pot. But he'd been doing it too long to stop now. Besides, Bebe might not have encouraged it, but she didn't mind it either, and it was still her house, as far as Isaiah was concerned. Isaiah's wife and Clarence's husband had just left together for one last run to the store to pick up ice and toilet paper, slipping through the trio of teenagers who sat on the front porch. Bebe's great-grandchildren. This wasn't the first time they'd experienced a death in the family. But it was the first one the cousins would be old enough to process as it was happening, from the phone calls informing them Bebe had passed in her sleep, to the private funeral in Glendale last week, to this moment, finally saying goodbye. Prentice leaned back on his elbows, eyes lasered to his phone screen. Ardith sat in the middle, head hanging low, brushing tears from her eyes before they could drop to her lap. On the other side of her, Hollis squeezed Ardith's shoulder, then drew her cousin into her arms as Ardith's sniffles deepened into sobs. Hollis glared over Ardith's head until Prentice felt the heat of her gaze and slowly set his phone down. He wasn't all that great at comforting people, but he patted his hand up and down Ardith's arm anyway. Everyone knew Ardith and Bebe had been the best of friends. Memories of Blossom would linger for each of the Blackwoods in the coming days, weeks, months. Some of them would be expected. Thoughts of her cooking, of course, or the warmth with which she greeted everyone who stepped across the threshold of her home. Some would sneak up on them, such as the fact that there was no longer anyone to put Taffy in her place, or how it felt like there was an anchor missing when they gathered at the house in Hancock Park, unmooring everyone, everything. Her soul may have been at rest, but Blossom Blackwood would continue to live with the family long after she was gone, in ways they never could have imagined. And once exposed, the secret she'd kept for nearly 70 years would stir up drama, worthy of a Hollywood star who'd never quite gotten her due. Part 1. Waiting in the Wings. Hollis. Hollis Blackwood hadn't understood the meaning of fame when she was a little girl. Not truly. She'd noticed that, sometimes, people she didn't know would do a double-take when they pulled up next to her family's car at a stoplight, or start whispering to each other when her father was picking up a prescription from the pharmacy, or choosing steaks at the Gelson's meat counter. The fifth time a stranger had approached their table at a restaurant, asking for a picture as they were digging into their entrees, she remembered wondering why people were so interested in her family in particular. Even at 6 years old, Hollis suspected that not everyone could know Isaiah Blackwood made the best chocolate chip pancakes on the planet. She'd been sitting in her car seat in the back, on their way home from dinner, when she'd blurted, "Why do people care so much about Dad?" Her parents loved to tell the story to anyone who would listen. The punchline was that they were driving past a billboard for one of her father's new movies, his supersized face grinning out over West Hollywood. By the time she was in 4th grade, though, Hollis had completely understood what fame meant. It meant that when people walked up to her father in public, even when he was having a bad day, he would still give them a big smile and pose for a selfie. It meant that, when the release of one of her father's movies was approaching, her parents would begin leaving her with Grandpa Abe and Taffy when they went out, so they could shield her from the ever-lurking paparazzi. It meant that, despite her parents' best efforts, Hollis herself was considered interesting enough for the gossip blogs to post the occasional photo or quick write-up simply by virtue of being a Blackwood. Today, however, was not about her or her parents. It was all about her great-grandmother. And as she observed all the people who had come together to remember Bebe, Hollis was overwhelmed, just as she had been when she was a little girl, by what fame meant. At 96 years old, Bebe had lived longer than many people in her generation, including her Hollywood peers.